There's been an exploit. You found a chink in the armor. You've established presence. You want to stop. You want to breathe. If you have a script, you want to follow it. You want to look around and see what you already have. You want to look around and see what else you can get from the control you already have. What do you do? Welcome to Practical Exploitation. I'm the noob, Patrick Norton, joined by the hacker elite dude himself, Mubix, a.k.a. Rob. Can we say your last name?
No, I don't. I don't think I can at this point. Like, this is bad. I think I'm Rob Fuller. Maybe.
He's been into the candy left over from Halloween.
Maybe.
Kid, don't leave your candy out. Your dad can end up like this. So last week, we had a lovely chat about PowerShell Empire 3.0, where it was, where it is, where it's going, why it's important for you to know that, especially if you're dealing with Windows environments. This week, let's talk about the 3 Ps, or 4 Ps, if you prefer. We don't. Of post-exploitation. This is a big deal. This is. Don't.
Well, it's a big deal. Excitement. Yeah. So so post-exploitation is my bread and butter. I am not. I'll just be completely honest. I'm not great at getting the initial shell. Like, that is all, somebody else does all the voodoo there. But once I'm on a box, that is where my brain goes alive, and I'm like absolutely happy about it. Like,
once you drop a shell, you're done. Post-exploitation. You've explored. You're done. Watch his face.
You're pushing buttons. You're pushing buttons right now. So if you want to go on that tangent right now, we're going to talk about risk and how risk is involved in what happens after you get a shell and what can happen because of that. And the fact that one system being exploited might not seem really important to you, but can result in catastrophic. Anyways.
Well, no, okay, but this is critical. So, somebody might be, the red team, they got onto a Windows box. Ooh, and but I mean, watch Rob's face. You give Rob a Windows box, hell's gonna break loose inside of your network. But you're laughing because you're evil, and I say that in a loving and affectionate way. But you gain access, and then moist exploitation.
I did the same thing.
Post-exploitation. but literally post-exploitation is all the really scary stuff. If you're a blue teamer, if you're a sysadmin, if you are dealing with yes, I have 70,000 users spread across 19 hospitals in 3 states, and we've got a little bit of a thing with phishing going on. And you may think all it takes is simple access. And what happens in post-exploitation, you take the beach and then you march into the objective.
Yeah.
Except you don't actually know what the objective is. You're just looking, you're looking to find all of the things.
Yeah. So, there's an interesting thing that you almost touched on when you said no. It's actually it's no. So you said that. All you need is, all you need, what's the term? Where all you need to do is find a single chink in the armor. That's one of the most famous things that red teamers or blue teamers have said across all of pen testing, lifetime, right? So the important thing to remember is that as a defender, that's a defeatist attitude, right? So you're thinking, all they have to do is find one. I can't patch everything, blah blah blah. But the important thing to remember as a defender, if you're listening to this or watching this and trying to learn defense or going into that, remember that once a red teamer is in, or once an attacker is in, they just have to mess up once and you got them. Once they catch that scent, it is almost always game over, unless you do some of the 3 Ps correctly. And so let's get into the first one, presence. So what I mean by presence is not standing in, when you enter a room, exuding presence and filling the room with your bravado or ego. What I mean by presence is...
It's for videos on YouTube.
What I mean by presence is taking a step, before you do the 3 Ps, one of the things I forgot to say is breathe. One of the things I see so many pen testers do, so many red teamers do, is as soon as they get that first shell As soon as they see, session open from interpreter, they start jamming on it as fast as possible and trying to, do Bloodhound and all these other tools that we've already talked about. And
let's not run down that hill. Let's walk down that hill.
Oh yeah. So some of the best real adversaries, real bad guys and criminals, what they do is so methodical. So and some of the red teamers that I learned from are incredibly methodical. And because they're methodical, they almost always win. And so if you race down something, one of the worst feelings in the world as a pen tester is that initial wait when you send the phishing email, wait and like, oh crap, they've definitely got it. They're totally gonna detect it. None of this worked. I'm horrible. All of the self-doubt just goes straight in for the 5 to 10 minutes where the email is just traversing the internet, and like.
And people are off at the water cooler,
or whatever, right? Like, but in an attacker's head,
whatever they're doing,
right? In an attacker's head, those seconds are hours long, and it's like, why aren't people checking their email? Why isn't this working? Did I send the link wrong? Did I get the payload wrong? Why is no one clicking on it? Like all of these things in their heads, and the anxiety that goes into those seconds, right? So, but once someone clicks an email, once someone actually does something. All of that pent-up anxiety just comes flooding out into actions on target. And so breathing, taking the second to breathe once you get that first shell and think about your next actions before doing your next actions is really important. That's why many testers, many good pen testers and red teamers have click scripts, things that they one by one go through. A quick story about that is, so SQL is Microsoft SQL is one of those things that you go after once you're inside of a network, and or any database, because that's where the data is. And there was a test when I was on with another tester who I was learning from, who was my mentor on a bunch of stuff, and I got into one SQL box and had access to it, so I started looking and enumerating all the stuff inside of it. And he came up beside me. He's like, "Did you check access to all of the SQL boxes?" "No, I have access to it. Like, I want to see what I got now." He's like, "Did you check access to all the SQL boxes?" "No, I told you. I'm. Did you check access?" And I finally got it. Like after the third try, he's like, "Go check access to all of them, then do things." And so. Like the seventh to last of 150 that I was checking access to was like the credit cards for the entire organization. Like we were done after that. And it was just a huge lesson for me. Like that stay to your script as much as you can, be thorough, follow through, and that kind of stuff. So presence for me is really important. And what that means is basically looking around the system and looking what you already have access to, right? Taking stock of what you have access to, because 9 times out of 10 on a test, on a red team assessment, you already have everything you need, right? You just don't know it yet because you haven't done the research on it. Another story is that there was one adversary that as a defender I had to go against. And as a defender, this adversary would break in using a phishing email and do things within 5 minutes and then be out. They would do a couple things in 5 minutes and then drop the shell and be gone. And we would do our incident response. We would block them. We would find the IP. We would set the hashes to as malicious. We'd submit it to VirusTotal. Do all the incident response things, and then they would come in 6 months later and do 3 or 4 things and then be gone. And I think about 2.5 years of doing that. The last time they did it, they had enough information from all of those attempts that they went straight to domain admin, got the thing that they wanted to get, and were gone within 5-10 minutes.
That's patience,
right? That's just insane to me. That is prep. Whatever they're doing to prepare all those domains or all the C2, It's the methodical effort of will that really is impressive and what gets the job done in post-exploitation.
So the first P is presence, right? So,
Yep.
There's been an exploit, you found a chink in the armor, you've established presence, you want to stop, you want to breathe. If you have a script, you want to follow it. You want to look around and see what you already have. You want to look around and see what else you can get from the control you already have. What do you do before we move on to the second P? What else should you be doing?
So, when it comes to like Windows, what you want to look for is remote desktop clients, what services are installed, what connects to that system, what endpoint protection is there, so you know what you're up against going forward, like the update schedule. If you happen to get onto like a Windows 10 box, but it's not 2004 yet, it's like 1608, there's a vulnerability there, right? Like just knowing that one piece of information can tell you a ton about the organization. And I like to think of the presence piece as sort of a Sherlock Holmes moment. You have to extrapolate the little bits of information that you get all over a system. Like if there is a directory called on like an OS X box, if there is a directory called chef inside of like userlib or whatever, and if you see that means that they are running chef and puppet to deploy services across the organization, or at least to that system, which means that they have to authenticate to that system somehow to do that, which means that there's going to be some kind of remote access into those systems, which means that you can listen to that. If you get admin access, you can ask for that and see what gets pushed down. You can also look at what packages are installed and what other things that are coming from Chef, so you kind of can get a sense of what other systems are going to look like too. Like there's a ton of information just by seeing that one folder that you can extrapolate out as part of your presence. And that comes from experience, but that can be shared experience. If you have a wiki, if you have like even just asking a network admin, hey, I saw this folder, what does that mean? And like a network admin friend or sysadmin friend or on Twitter or whatever.
Right.
That knowledge can be stored and shared and gained over time. You can't expect anyone to see that folder and know exactly what it is right out of the gate, but like having that experience is what make good pen testers better, right?
Right. At what point do you you may never stop thinking about presence, but at what point do you think about the second P, persistence?
So the second P is a little tricky, and we put them in order for a purpose, and because you're supposed to think of them in this order. However, the second P, persistence, can come very soon after presence or a little later. So it all is based on your appetite for risk. So as a tester, how risky is it for you to continue doing your thing? One of the baseline mantras that I go with is 2 is 1, 1 is none. And so if you have a shell on a network and you do anything to mess up that shell, because these frameworks are built by tons of developers or a couple developers or one developer, and it's all open source or not well supported or whatever. And there's a lot of network things that can happen. And if you lose that one shell because you tried to ping something that never ended, and it just is a thread that never ends, and so your shell will never come back to talk to you again, then you're SOL. You have to do all of that work to get back onto that system that you were just on that you screwed up, right? So 2 is 1, 1 is none. So I always get a second shell from that same system as soon as I get the first one. But persistence is the method of doing, making a way to keep access to a network or keep access to a system going forward. And the reason I keep these 3 Ps around and these 4 Ps around is so that I can keep my mind open to what those meanings are.
Sure.
And so persistence can mean I have a username and password, and that's it.
Right.
Because they have a VPN that only takes username and password, and or a Wi-Fi connection that only takes username and password, or Citrix like access that only takes username and password.
You get on a system, you have presence, you're looking to maintain persistence. Is this a good time to look around? Or maybe a great time if you are familiar with Unix or the various Linux flavors, or OS 10, or maybe you've tapped into an OS 10 shop and it turns out they have a print server that's a Windows 7 box. I mean, we all pray for moments like that. But is that something you want to do when you're trying to maintain persistence, when you're trying to get a second shell, additional presence, additional ability to stay or can maintain the access you already have? Is that a good time is this a really good excuse to know all the operating systems and be able to manipulate across multiple platforms?
So
hack.
Persistence on multiple platforms is tough. Windows is pretty well documented.
Sure.
Like you can just Google for Windows persistence and get a crap ton of different results. Persistence on OS X and Linux are actually more documented, but not documented as persistence. They're documented as remote administration. And okay, so one of my favorite of all time privileged persistence mechanisms on OS X was the fact that it has a web server installed on it by default. Like all OS X boxes have a web server installed by default. It also has PHP by default. So you drop a web shell, a PHP web shell on a Mac, and you just enable that web server to be listened outbound or inbound on the firewall. And you can access that box anytime you're next to it, which is amazing. Or with Big Sur coming out, there's a lot less you can do at a kernel level, but in user space on a OS X box, there's so much because it's built for developers, like it's built for designers. It has Python coming out of the gate. It has PHP out of the gate. It has web servers. It has Brew. Like there's just so much that you can do there with SSH, ZSH, and all kinds of stuff. On the Linux front, persistence there is the same thing. You just not install. You can put SSH keys. You can make cron jobs. You can do all kinds of things on a Linux box. And the great thing about Linux is that, and OS X for that matter, is that most of the OS was built to happen at a user level, right? It was built to separate root from user. And so you can do almost anything as a user as long as you stay in your space of your home directory or whatever. And
it's a feature, not a bug.
So, like, whatever user you access, you just install persistence as them as a cron job or whatever, and it'll run as much as you want it to run. So that's persistence, and there's a metric ton of persistence methods, and so I don't mean what I want to make sure that people get out of this section of it is that they should think outside of binaries and DLLs and dropping stuff onto systems, and also think about it as, if I can get the Wi-Fi password, that's persistence, because I can get back on that same network beyond the firewall anytime I want. If I can get a certificate or 2FA enabled, one of the tests that we did, I've done recently, was we actually enrolled a new 2FA token onto a user who already had 2FA, and now you can approve the 2FA from either one of the phones. and so we had access after, like, all we had to do was get him to or him or her to the to enable it once, and we were in, and we just installed our own 2FA and we enabled it. So like, and there's so much you can do that is outside of the standard persistence methods that you can Google for, that people should keep in mind. And that's one of the reasons why I keep that P around, is to keep that open.
It is an excellent P. Let's talk about the third P.
Okay.
Pivoting,
Yeah.
I think, is probably the most common one people think of. But you'd also like to talk about 3.5P, the fourth P,
Sure.
privilege escalation.
So pivoting and privilege escalation, 3 and 4. The reason why they're last is because presence is so important.
Right.
That you should spend the time on it to figure out the right ways to pivot and privilege escalate. And you don't always have to go, oh, I got a shell on a user's box, now I got to get admin so I can dump hashes. No. No, you don't have to. Follow the P's. And so the reason why I think pivoting and privilege escalation, and I put those together, is I think all of it is pivoting. Because no matter if you're going from a standard user to an admin user, or even a standard user under UAC and to above UAC, just bypassing UAC, you are technically pivoting to new access. If you, and the other reason is, if you are accessing a share on a different machine, that is more access than you had in your brain, in your consciousness, in your presence, than you had before, right? So that's privilege escalation as well. So pivoting and privilege escalation are the same thing. And as long as you keep in mind that those are the same thing, and keep your brain out of that box of segmenting those two actions, then then you're going to go a long way when it comes to finding those things. Like going back to the chef folder, if I know that chef is there, and I know that chef is there on other systems, and I can drop a file on those other systems that will give me a shell back once chef runs, like that's pivoting, privilege escalation, and presence all rolled up into one, right? Because I knew chef was there, I know that I can drop a file over there, and because I can drop a file over there, whoever runs it is giving me new access, new shells from new users, from new systems, and like, how do I say this? Keep your mind open when you think about these things. That's what I want to say.
Well, look for every opportunity. Don't just look for, I'm going to get another machine and another machine and another machine. Can I escalate my privileges? Can I move up to another level? Can I gain access to it? It seems like, I hate to bring up football metaphors, but mobile, agile, hostile. Keep your head on a swivel.
And the other thing is that you never know where that next step is going to come from. You just have to be methodical about finding those things. You have to click scripts or notes or walkthroughs, or however you want to talk about it. Always work methodically. And if you work methodically, you will find those chinks in those armor. If you go haphazard all over the place, for instance, oh my gosh, this is a story that I've told so many times that people probably have heard this who've watched previous episodes of either Practical Exploitation or Metasploit Minute. There was one instance where we had gotten a shell on the first box, and it took us like 2 months to get a first shell. So we were very, very protective of it. And so we did our presence. We looked around the box. We were having a really hard time getting to another machine. We got to another machine finally, and they had this network had network segmentation like out the wazoo. Like, it was really well done. And so we finally got to a second box, found access there. Finally got to a third box, found access there. And we're like 15 machines in when we finally get access to the data that we were tasked with getting. And it was like design documentation for widgets incorporated or whatever. And so we start backing out, we start cleaning up, getting ourselves off of those machines, and finally back to our original one. All we have access is to the original one, writing up the report. And as we're writing up the report, my coworker is like, "Hey, did you run GP results /Z? That's on our click script. I don't see it in the report." And I'm like, "No, but we got everything we needed. Like, we don't have to include it. It's just more work to include it." And he's like, "Did you run GP results /Z?" I'm like, "No, like I didn't do it." And he's like, "Go do it." So on the very first box that we ever had access to, I ran GP results /Z. And for those who don't know, GP results /Z gives you all of the group policy settings from Windows Active Directory for the current user under the current context. So it gives you very verbose output of all of the settings and change and things from Active Directory. Why do you have your hand to your palm already?
Because I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for it. I can feel it coming.
So in the group policy settings, at the very top of the applied settings, there was a add new user, domain admin Bob, to all workstations. Here's the password in clear text. So on the very first box that we were on, very first box, if I would have gone through and been methodical about running all of, I haven't forgotten to ever run that command ever again. But it was a domain admin for the entire organization right there in the group policy settings. And it wasn't...
Which could have saved you another 14 boxes of fun.
It was 3 months. It took us 3 months to go from box 1 to box 15. Like,
and if you'd run...
If I had stuck to presence and actually done the things in the script and not gotten, hoodwinked over to like, oh, this shiny thing. We have a shell over here now. It's like, we wouldn't have had to get that shell over there if we would have just done this. Anyways.
So it would have saved, what, 3 months?
Yes, it would have saved 3 months worth of work. So when I
must make a billable hours joke.
When I say that you should follow your click scripts and be methodical, I say it from having made that mistake multiple times, and it bite me in the rear. So that's what I mean by privileged escalation and pivoting is like, it's really important, but it's the last thing on your block. Like, it should be something that you only look to be doing after you've like scoured that machine, that access that you have 6 ways from Sunday. Like, everything about it, everything about it. Because if you know everything about that one machine, guaranteed you're going to know so much about the organization that you can make those other steps easier.
Let's kind of take a breath. Take a step here. How does something that's come up in like every single stage of this conversation, all 3.5, 3.5, 4 Ps, is kind of working your list, working your checklist.
Yep.
How do you put together a checklist by experimenting over time? Do you inherit one? Do you download one?
All of the above. Completely honestly, like, many pentest firms already have click scripts, but but like, most pentesters are very protective of theirs. Like that's their secret sauce, right? That's what makes them their mojo, right? So,
right.
So getting that access to that is not always easy. You usually have to be mentor or mentee to have that. And then there's some stuff online, like Payload All the Things is a GitHub repo that has tons of payloads or actions for all kinds of stuff, and it's huge. There's also iread.team, which is a great resource. It's a Git book that has tons of resources about it. I should put together. The only problem with any of these is they're not in order. They're great resources for you to figure out things, but there's nothing in them that says you should do these things first. So that's what your experience and your time in like what gives you value or what you can figure out the most. That's when you start making your own list. And because like for me, GP result/Z is the very first command I run because I learned my lesson. But like that's all. It's very unique to each individual and each person, and because those are the things that you have to learn over time and figure out what works for you and what doesn't.
Right. So generally speaking, it's going to include your favorite tools, your favorite hacks, your favorite exploits, and you'll kind of work out over time how to run them and when to run them.
Yeah. But the only problem there is that most of the tools are all about the second and third P's. They're all about privilege escalation and pivoting and persistence. Very few of GitHub repos or anything that I've seen, at least, have anything to do about pulling information about the actual system you're on. The only tool that I know of that does a really good job of it is Seatbelt, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about Seatbelt, I think, in the next episode. So you should definitely check that out for present stuff, or just go to the GitHub repo for it. But it's really kind of sad that there isn't really more information out there about what those steps are for presence, especially on OS X and Linux.
All right, so the 3 P's of post-exploitation, or the 4 P's if you prefer: presence, persistence, privilege escalation, and or pivoting. Those are kind of one giant P that's about, well, yeah, that didn't come out the way I meant it to, but you know what I mean. Privilege escalation and pivoting. So you've talked about tools, you've talked about why. Most important of all, I think you've talked about, working a checklist or setting up a process that works for you, sticking to it, and taking that moment to stop, pause, breathe, and not immediately try to dogpile on all the things willy-nilly. It seems like patience is kind of the big lesson of
there's another P.
Post-exploitation.
So patience, the patience of post-exploitation, pivoting, blah, 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 blah. I can't do it. I was going to think. Anyways, yeah, so there just happens to be so many P's in post-exploitation. But it's really important. It's a hard lesson to learn. Like, I learned it the hard way in a lot of cases through the stories we've already gone through. And I hope that defining it this way in an episode for everyone helps people to get into the rhythm of doing it. Being methodical, like we said, and going down that checklist. And even if you find that gem, even if you see that squirrel, continue down that checklist and keep going.
Squirrel!
Right? Because, like, it's going to happen. You're going to see, like, an admin credential that actually doesn't work, but you don't know it doesn't work, and you have to go find it, and you're going to spend those extra 4 minutes that you're not going to do the other P's for, and you're going to lose your shell or whatever. Like, if you follow the P's of post-exploitation, you'll do way better and be more successful. And so that's it for this episode. I really enjoyed talking with you, Patrick. I'm glad that you're coming on to the show more.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I think that that about wraps it up. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button. Smash the like button, or whatever it's called. Whatever people say. Anyways.
Subscribe and like and comment down below if you have questions, because that's where Mubix is going to find them. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Mubix, and we'll be hacking till the cows come home. Take it easy.
Thanks for supporting Hack 5. Find all our shows, community, and pentest products at hack5.org.
Welcome to
In
Practical
3, 2. You're a hacker. Can you count to 3?
No, I can't.
Dun 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 dun. In 3, 2.
Welcome to Practical. I can't even say it tonight.